what's going on, everybody? It's Chris with InsideTheU. We just had the head coaches press conference today, right behind me, as both head coaches spoke to reporters for about 30 minutes, kind of their final comments before the game tomorrow. And here's what head coach Cristobal had to say about the journey his team has been on from winning that big game against Notre Dame in game one to losing those two games in the middle of the season, and then the winning streak heading into this national championship game.
I think game one opened up our eyes. I think the entire country expected us not to do well against a great team, Notre Dame. And that built our confidence in a big time way and had us going the right way. And we got field rushed, in Dallas over at SMU. And reality hit, and everyone on our football program saw that graphic, that edit. Miami has a 5% chance to make it into the postseason. And I think that's what galvanized us. I think we realized that we had to approach each and every day with being the most excited, the most energetic team on the field, and that pre-snap and post-snap discipline had to be at the forefront, and that ball security couldn't be compromised, and neither could ball disruption, and that you had to be physical and find a way to out-hit your opponent on every single play, and that had to mean more to you than it did to the other side. And I think those principles just continue to push us forward, so that if we practice in that manner, then we could earn the right to cut it loose on game day. And as those games have come on, we have gotten better and better, and again, still have a lot to improve, and looking forward to tomorrow night.
Just listen to Coach Cristobal and his comments leading up to the game, multiple press conferences and availabilities. He's been speaking quite a bit, and I think he's done a great job just talking about the program that it's been on, the progress, and answering a lot of questions about everything. I think he's done a really good job. One thing that stood out to me too about what he's been talking about throughout this process is just his own personal journey from growing up. Everybody has been talking about the Columbus ties, but he's talked about what that program meant to him. He talked about his parents, their influence on him when he was young, and certainly he's been very appreciative of the opportunity he got at the University of Miami, getting an opportunity to play for a high-level program and being a part of it and winning 2 national titles. So talking about his own personal growth as a player, as a coach, even today, someone asked about that journey of, kind of dedicating his life to being a coach, as opposed to going to that route of being a Secret Service, going into that training program there. So he's spoken a lot about that, and it's kind of just refreshing to hear that, because we don't hear that. It's not like he talks about this all season long. So that's been a big topic of conversation from him. But again, I think he's really handled himself with a lot of confidence throughout these press conferences and really throughout the playoffs. I noticed it last week or last game at the Fiesta Bowl, but just I think in general, heading into this national championship game, that is what stood out to me. I think he's doing a good job with handling the press and answering questions so far. Okay, so just a few notes about the game tomorrow. Yes, Miami's going to be the visitors. They're going to be in those all-white uniforms that they've had all throughout the playoffs, those Stormtrooper uniforms that they've had so much success with this year. And then the thing that's going to be noticeable is Miami's going to be the visiting team. So they're going to be on the visiting sideline. However, with the way the stadium's constructed, Miami will actually be in their home locker room that they have throughout the season. So yes, it will look a little bit different in terms of that, where Miami will be situated, where they run out of the tunnel and things like that. They will have their own locker room. And then obviously the crowd, that's going to be a big difference, as well as the signage and everything around the stadium. And I do want to point this out. Neither team is going to have a stadium walkthrough. Essentially, that would happen either today or tomorrow, but they're going to do that as soon as they get to the stadium tomorrow for the game. That'll be the first time that the teams will be in there. I find that to be interesting, something a little bit different. But again, anytime you talk about these teams with certain situations like this or whatever it might be, both teams have to go through it. So that's just something I wanted to point out, is both teams are working on their final preparations, the film, the meeting, these kinds of things that typically happen the night before a game. So after I put together yesterday's video, that was following media day and practice. And then at night, I went up to Hard Rock Casino. There was an event there, and if you haven't seen the video, definitely check that out. So Hard Rock Bet put on this event with former Miami legends, and it was great. It was about a 40-minute discussion, a panel from the former greats, Michael Irvin, Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, Devin Hester, Edgerrin James, Hall of Famers, in a panel hosted by Eric McLean, who did a great job asking questions to the panel. It was fun to hear all the guys' responses. And one thing that stood out to me, just about the whole panel discussion, it wasn't about necessarily like the good old days and all this kind of stuff. They talked a lot about this year's team, Mario Cristobal. They had a great conversation about Malachi Toney, even the Bryce Fitzgerald situation they addressed, and keys to the game. That they all broke down their keys to the game, what they think needs to happen, and just listen to all these guys talk and give advice to the team essentially from afar, or just their perspective on what they see with the team this year. I thought it was great. Mark Fletcher, another guy, Edge gave great conversation about what he sees in Mark, and just all these guys. And obviously Michael Irvin's been at all the games, and his responses were great too. So all the guys, and just seeing those guys in particular was great. So definitely check out the channel. Watch the entire thing if you have some time. Again, it's about 30-40 minutes, but I think you'll find it interesting to hear what they have to say about this year's team and kind of the program with where it's at right now. Again, a little bit of the past, but not too much, in case you're looking forward to hearing about the national championship. I do want to point out too, not only were those guys there, but a lot of other former players were there as well. Had a chance to talk with some of these guys. Jeremy Shockey, Clinton Portis were there. It was great seeing Jonathan Vilma. Had a good conversation with Bryant McKinney for a little bit, talking about the Miami offensive line. So just seeing all those guys, in addition to those guys, was great. John Beeson was there. Brian Monroe, of course, with his involvement with Hard Rock Bet, was there. And I do want to point this out too, because I thought this was great. I ran into former Miami quarterback Kyle Wright, and we had a good conversation. It was just good catching up with them, and he's doing well, and he's certainly rooting on the Hurricanes. Obviously, we talked about it. It was a difficult time for him. It didn't go the way he had planned when he got to Miami with everything, but he's doing well. He's certainly rooting for the team. And one thing that was great to see was just like, we hear so much, we talk so much about the former Miami players and the Brotherhood and the legends that have played at Miami, but there are a lot of players that played for the program that didn't make it to the NFL or the Hall of Fame. And all of these guys are certainly excited. They're all still part of the program. They're all still part of this Brotherhood that everybody always talks about. And I just want to make sure we don't forget about everybody that is involved with this program. And it's been a big reminder to me with all of this, just kind of leading up to the game. And all the people that are excited, just even being on campus yesterday, fans greeting the team once again as they left practice to go back to their hotel. A lot of fans, were excited. We just want to be a part of it and just really enjoying all of this, as I'm sure all of you that are watching this video, certainly you're excited as well, and sharing memories and thoughts of the team, the program, whatever you might have with this team. But again, great conversation with Kyle, and good seeing these other guys as well. And Kyle and Beeson, these guys that were part of that 03 recruiting class. That was my first team covering the program at Miami. So I feel like I have a close connection and close memories to that 03 class. Glenn Cook was another guy that I spoke with recently. And so I'm always interested in hearing how these guys are doing specifically. So something I forgot to mention in other videos doing these recaps was the practices at Miami. And I kept forgetting to mention it, and so I'm going to mention it today. And even though it doesn't really apply to today specifically, but I'd been hearing that the guys have been having physical, intense practices. Yesterday when we were there for practice, it was just a light practice going through drills. We didn't get to see a lot, and that's not a good example of what I've been hearing. Just the intensity, and Mario Cristobal and his intensity has been there at practice, helping with drills and things like that. So it's really been par for the course. Essentially, this is what Miami's kind of done. There was good on good, for example, leading up to the national championship, meaning the better players facing the better players in practice, offense, defense stuff, and, just kind of getting ready for the game. So that's been their approach all year. They're continuing that same approach heading into this game. And I just want to pass that along, just kind of like a little note on how practices have been going. And certainly at this point, all the practice preparation is kind of, coming down to the final stretches here, the final prep work, final film study. Carson Beck has talked about this recently during the playoff run, that, typically the day of the game, he might watch a game or two just to try to see on that game day if there's anything extra he can kind of gain to learn about situational football that the other team likes to do. He always likes to do that on game day, this extra film work. And certainly Carson is going to be big in this. And Mario talked about Carson today too, just how much he's meant to the program. And also too, what we've seen with this team during the playoff run, with the recipe to success with its offense, and Carson kind of managing the game in a way, or, leaning on this run game, or taking his shots when he can, really limiting mistakes is a big key and a big point of emphasis. Shannon Dawson said at Media Day yesterday, Indiana's a team that likes to tip pass, gets their hands on the ball there, and certainly Carson's got to be aware of that. But again, Miami's kind of found itself a little bit here with what's been working offensively. And I think if we think about the totality of the season, how much things kind of shifted and changed, and not just with how it's looked, where Carson obviously has started every game, he's been out there, but what's been asked of him has changed a little bit. Malachi Toney, a big impact in game one and throughout the season, but then we started to see some creative packages, either throwing the ball or whatever it might be with Malachi as the season went along. We talked about Mark Fletcher. He's having a great playoff run right now. But Gerard Pringle Jr. led the team in rushing in each of its last 4 games of the regular season. So you're seeing guys kind of shift, and we've seen Shamar Brown, Marty Brown have some key plays in big games. So it's been interesting to see how everything's kind of just changed a little bit, kind of adjusted throughout the year. And I think as a learning experience by watching all of this and covering it all, I think we all just have to be a little bit of aware that, game 3 might look a little different than game 11, 12, 13, 14. A season can progress, and certainly the teams that make it this far, I'm sure Indiana would tell you the same thing. Like, you have to progress throughout the season and do make adjustments, learn while still winning, and that's certainly a key. And you got to play your best football at the end of the season. That's an obvious statement there. So that's it for me here. I'm going to get going. I'm actually looking outside right now, and it's raining. Hopefully there's not rain but on game day, but if there is, there is. Everybody will just have to adjust. Again, like I mentioned earlier, both teams are going to be in the same position. So definitely want to thank everybody for watching these daily reports leading up to the game. Really appreciate it. Appreciate your support. The comments have been great. I love hearing what you guys have to say about this game and your excitement. It's great seeing how excited everybody is for the run that Miami's been on, and we'll see on Monday night if they can cap it off.